Hello and welcome to another video on the complete intro to SQL and Postgres. The whole idea of this series of videos is to act as a social proof or as a proof of work of this updating learning process. Because right now we're going to take a look at the Postgres SQL version 14. Currently they are in the 16. So the idea here is to, well, by recap and updating our knowledge in this current version, then look up at the something that they call the matrix change or feature feature matrix, okay, in Postgres as a way to keep up the pace and know which one of the flavors or this which one of features they add on here, right? So this is something very interesting because now here we're looking is at the version 14. And then what are the things that are available and not depend on their features, whether it's in index or constraints, as well as SQL, data definition language, performance. So and also JSON. So by looking now here at this particular database in the SQL, and first, this course is taught by Brian Holt, uh, this software engineer that have worked previously in several companies like Reddit, Netflix, Microsoft, and now currently he's the PN at Snowflakes. The idea of this is to look at and be able to articulate to describe is what is this database? What is the SQL? What is Postgres? What is the subtle difference between the SQL and Postgres? Okay, so SQL is the standard, the from ISO, which is the International Standard Organization here, where they have a variety of strategy when it comes to tackle some problems or goal. So you have here no poverty. So you have here no poverty. Uh, this is sustainable goals they have, right? Zero hunger, health, social issues, as well as industry, uh, development, global environment. But as you can see here is all of this, and particularly the SQL is an industry standard for manufacturing. So the SQL is this language, which it comes from the SQL sequence language. It was created in the 70s as a way to well interact to the database and to store data, and then it grow to what we know right now. In Postgres, all right, you can think of this as the engine or as the environment, pretty much like JavaScript examples, where JavaScript is the language, where now it has several environments such as uh, the browser, Node, Dino, Rhino, JavaScript, which is something interesting for IoT, and Postgres is just one of these flavors of among all of these different database management systems, DBAMS, such as SQL or uh, SQL servers, MariaDB, MySQL, IBM DB, right? And each one of them has a different approach and have different features for that. So right now, PostgreSQL is the one who is leading the way for the rest of the relational database or relational algebra, which is what is using behind the scenes. So anytime you hear something about algebra, it means for generalizations. Okay, So that was interesting as a way to recap about this SQL and Postgres. All right. Another interesting example for this is like SQL is this convention or this standard to follow the or is a recipe for cookbook, whereas Postgres and MariaDB, MySQL, SQLi Server, IBNDB, they are the fully stocked kitchen with all the tools ready to cook in. So pretty much that, and that's exactly what we're looking right now as a way to make myself familiar and update the knowledge. So first thing first, this course is for developers. They are not intended for DBA or database administrators. Uh, Here, what we're gonna look is at how to set up a database, how to connect to a one, how to think about data going to tables, okay? Also look at the best way to query your data for your application, identify and optimize slow queries, and how to connect your SQL query with Node.js. As you can see here, this is something that is fairly common in the backend to database development, all right? And where the value proposition is for the company, okay, as a way to manage data and curate that and be careful with that data and follow best practice, uh, as well as having some backup plan. That's also relevant for DBA or for DevOps as well. But you can see all of these tasks will slowly overlapping each other. Now, this course won't teach us how to replicate database or how to manage Postgres instance or how to deploy that. None of that. So we look at how can we start to set up the Postgres database as well as creating tables, make ourselves familiar with the Docker setup, and understanding all the different commands as a way to now getting into the Docker instance, and make yourself also familiar with the client side, right? Which is the one that actually is going to make the query to the Postgres database or to the Postgres server. And how by looking at that, all right, something that I will argue that I will do that as well in the case of how do you put it, as a way to get myself familiar. And second, Brian Hall recommendation is that he use is the PSQLite. All right, there are tons of SQL servers that allow you to do things. All right, but he prefers to go in use the PSQL in terminal. Well, because he was raised by that. He started to develop application at 11 years old, and yeah, the point of this is like, all right, it makes a lot of sense for them, and as a way to understand is how you're going to query your data using the client, and then how you need to query your data using a wrapper. For example, how you're going to query your data from the server, not inside of the Postgres server, right? And then we look at how we can create our tables here. What are the anatomy of creating our tables, as well as get yourself familiar with the SQL reference, such as create a table, and what you can do here. Define is the property as well as the constraint here. Make yourself familiar with that, and then look at other commands like alter as a way to now indicate is this bunch of transactions or operation that you want to do, to verify if all of those transactions were done correctly, good. If not, roll back the entire uh, operation. So do not do anything. So this is one of the principles that followed by some of these relational database management system, which is the ACID principle. That mm, that acronym is not a good acronym. It's actually got a bad rap because it's like ACID. But the idea behind this is like anytime you going to make a transaction or an operation or you're going to declare a statement here, okay, must be atomic and also consistent so that the operation that you do actually is being done per operations, per transactions. So it is atomic, it is consistent, it is integrity. So the integrity is remains. So once you, for example, save the data on the database or create a table for that, you do that great. And also is durable. That's the reason why we're using this database behind the scenes. And then we move on to the SQL commands as a way to look at how you can do insert, how you can do massive inserts, and what happens when you have a conflict in there. Uh, you can use some of the conflict methods or on conflict as a way, these particularly tactics, techniques, as a way to get yourself familiar with uh, when dealing with that. So, for example, if you find any, how do you put it? If you have, for example, that you have already something in your table, the database like cauliflower, hey, don't do anything. Okay, so move on. What is the next one? Okay, so on conflict, do nothing, which means is that move on. Uh, Move on with the next one as a way to add these values to this table, and also how we can do something called like upserts. Okay, as a way to say, hey, if you find something in the table, if you find a row in the table, let's go to now update their values. All right, for examples. So on conflict, and you're gonna find is which conflict is. So depend on the constraint you might have, do update set for that. And also look at and also look at how you can update normal values, okay, as well as delete them. And as I move on here, then slowly to see how you can now returning data, some tactics again, some techniques that are widely used, especially when developing applications. So all of this, it also leads us to now that you know how to create a table, how to alter the anatomy of a table by adding or removing columns, indicating is the constraints that that column you want to have, and also how you can now starting to populate the data uh, with insert, massive insert, upsert, and deleting data. Now let's gonna look at how you can query actually your data, and that is using the select. So select is this query that allow you to uh, get the data, look up for the data, pull the data from the database. So some recommendation of using that is uh, always indicate what are the properties that you want to pull up from the table. Imagine that you have working on Facebook or some massive database. You don't want to pull that entire database or the entire row. You want to put is only the property that you need. And that's great. That's interesting. So, well, Then I look at how you can use it select with where clause and move on. For example, when you want now to compare is strings, giving a particular input, and you want to compare that, how it is helpful to use something called like instead of strict equality. And because like is in case sensitive or is case sensitive, how you can use is something called like the percentage as a way to match. This is part of this regex pattern, or as a way to match 0 or 1 parameters, okay, or the underscore as a way to match 1 parameter of this. So this is something interesting, by the way. This is something very, very interesting because the whole point with this, for example, like and alike, is that get yourself familiar with how you can now is, for example, doing the string search, okay, or text search, which is something very, very interesting. And I didn't know how to do that, especially on Postgres. So, okay, as I move on here, okay, yep. So as I move on here, all right, and then I look at how you can do is the SQL pagination. You can use something called like offset, but for performance, and the best way to do this pagination is by using is the where clause here. Using is the AD sometimes. So, all right. I also wonder how you can keep up the pace of your page. You know, how, yeah, perhaps right now I'm not looking at that. Okay, how to make this pagination. Uh, but yeah, okay, no problem. So after I went over to the most common SQL command, all right, as a way to also get yourself familiar with command SQL functions like lower as well as concat, and how you can, for example, is concat to string column to actually find if something is in there. So, for example, the title of the ingredient as well as the type of this ingredient, whether it's a fruit, vegetable, you name it. And how by looking at that, you see that particularly pattern using is this pattern matching mechanism and using I like, which is insensitive like, as a way to get your sense and develop a sense of how you're going to slowly creating your queries, basic queries right now. And a word on something important here, which is no Postgres in the SQL injections, because we're gonna see how can we make all of this query and practice that using a server. All right, holy hell, you're about to die. Okay. Uh, we look at a very interesting website, which is this connects versus objections, PGS equalize and typeform, which is great. All right. If you want to have that server connect to your Postgres, and as you can see, is uh, the top line of all of that is PG. You can also change the color here. I think it is. But pure JavaScript and libpq with the same API, which is great. Uh, and then you have other alternative like that. So it's Sequelize or TypeORM and that kind of thing. I think if we use Prisma Prisma because Prisma is something very, very recently. Prisma, we can add Prisma here. Is pulling the data there. So of course, Prisma. So Prisma is something that is fairly new, fairly new. So yeah, show me the data for the last 5 years. It's like that. But that is very, very interesting. This trend is that on December they stop the use of that. And Prisma, it has 8 years. Interesting. Prisma has 8 years for that. hmm Even though that has the most amount of star, even more than PG, but PG has uh okay, PG have more years. It means that it allegedly is more robust than that. PG. hmm That's interesting. That's interesting. So move on now. We mentioned briefly about is the no Postgres because now we're going to move on to actually make our transactions from a backend server. We choose Node.js and Express because this is what allegedly, but the vast majority of people are used to it. And how we gonna now, especially when you have to connect to a database, the a war of client and yeah, a war on client and pull. So client is anytime you want to create a connections to a database. So for that you have to create just one single connections. But what happens if you have now is uh, hundreds of requests in your web server, and that becomes a problem because anytime you want to connect the database, you need to open a socket, establish a handshake, set up the so establish a so every time you create a socket or every time you create a connection, you have to create a socket or open a port, do a handshake, do the authorization, set up the SSLs, and all of this process is expensive. It takes time. So the idea of using now poll is that you ask the client, hey, do we have some connections already open? If it is, please give me one for this particular request or for this particular query. So the client here is now reusing is the uh, yeah, the client here now is or this pool is now reusing a lot of these connections as a way to keep alive the activity and make it performance. So to reduce the cost of talking to a database, especially when you have a web server. All right. Okay. Which is something that he briefly mentioned here. What is this? Project time. That's right. Connected to the database, exactly. Parametrization. Yeah, yeah. This is also interesting. PG has two ways to connect to a database. So you can think of a client as an individual connection you open and then eventually close to your Postgres database. Exactly. So when you call connect on a client, it handshake with the service and open a connection for you to start using. You eventually call in to end your session with a client. With pool, it's a pool of clients that the PG has. Okay, so with opening and closing clients can be expensive if you're doing a lot. Imagine you have servers that get 1,000 requests, or not only 1,000, 10,000 requests, 100 requests per second. And every one of those needs to open a line to a database. All that opening and closing connection is a lot of overhead. It's very expensive. And a pool therefore holds onto connections. You basically just say, hey pool, query this. Exactly. You're basically telling, especially when you create a pool, it's like, hey pool, query this. Okay, do you have any open connections? Query this. And here is a way to reuse this connection or is this client. If has and if it has a spare connection, open it. We'll give it to you. If you don't tell, then yeah. If you don't, if you don't, then it will open another one. Pretty neat, right? So all of these reusable connections are being handled by the pool. So you say, hey pool, I want to make this query. You know, hey pool, query this. So we're going to be using pools today since we're doing a web server. So that's one of the things. Otherwise, stick to pool. Let's see how we can connect to the database. All of these things are being already done uh, for this. And this is how you can query your data as a way to get that data from that. And a word about user inputs, especially SQL injections and parametrizations. The TLDR is that you never trust user input, especially if you want to use a query, because they can now add to your string, your query, if you're using a template string, that kind of thing, and they can inject database code. So this is what caused the vast majority of hacking. And I will say that because, and also Brian Holt mentioned that because this is something that the vast majority of developers out there, they don't know how this actually thing work. That's one of the reasons why you have to invest in your education. Mm, pay for it, my friend, because things are gonna get real. So the way of how you can now prevent this kind of attacks, okay, is by parameterize your queries. So you don't want, for example, someone actually that is passing a wants to read your data, okay. So select all of the ingredients here, okay. Select all of the ingredients or select all of the data from user on tables, and then you drop the table users. You're done. So to prevent that, we use something called parameterized queries. Here is how you can do that, and now it is time for us to actually do that. What it's going to do is to actually match is with this token is the value that we're going to pass here. All right. Here now it is time to clone this repo. Uh, Yesterday we looked at there are several things here. Okay, as a way to clone this repo, I would like to create is a fork of this. Okay, yeah, create a fork. That's right. Create a fork from that, and then now it is time to copy this. We go back to the server. Now save this, and in fact, there you got it. All right. We are here. That's right. SQL apps. This is now complete intro. Let me make dir. Right now you're not able to see what I'm doing, but what I'm doing here is this. Actually create here complete complete intro to SQL, right? SQL and Postgres. Okay, getting here to SQL and Postgres. All right, and now it is time to clone our repo. Hey, let's going to clone this. Since we're using SSH for that, there you got it. All right, we already have the key, all of that thing. Getting here SQL apps, and there we go. So here we're gonna work is with the ingredients. There you got it. This one. Okay. So let me open out a terminal here for that. There you got it. Why will I want to save that? No, not at all. I don't want to do that. All right. Okay, that's right. You're not gonna see what I'm doing right now because I already closed that. And here we are. All right. So briefly, explanation here is all the things that we set up for the HTML, right? As a way to see things much more interesting. We're using is the swiper, by the way. That's also interesting. On the client, we have all of the uh, mhm. We have all of this interpolation here. As you can see, what it's doing is interpolate that here and then make a request for that new location protocol plus window location host plus ingredient search. That's right. All right. That's interesting how it's going to create the URL. The URL. Mm-hmm. That URL, or if the type exists. If not, then you're gonna do this, search append page, and then you're going to wait for that. This is actually for make the request to that. uh, Another function which is populate results here. So once you get the data, now it is time to feed up here with a template here exactly. And what you're gonna do is to iterate from that template and replace. Let me see if we can show it. No, really? Can we not? Not for the most. Okay, no problem. As you can see here, what it's doing is to get the element by that, assign the elements to something that we're gonna pass down, what will be the results and the templates. All right, and depend on the amount of results, we're going to iterate through all of these results that we get from the API, all of these rows, and we go now to start to create the rows HTML, which is interpolated. So whatever you have the template function, you're gonna pass is the proper data from that, which is in this case is this ID, image, title, and type. You're gonna pass that as an object, similar to this, similar to this. And on the server, which is something that we're going to actually query the data, this is where we're going to put our data here, right? I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. But we're gonna do that is on the root, my friend. Exactly. We're gonna do this. It's not here because after all you're exporting this as a model, you know, the model ingredients. So that's not what we want, by the way. What we want is, oh, come on, man. What we want is to go back and open it from here. Okay. Now we're talking. Okay. 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 All right. Okay. Now we are talking. Exactly. Exactly. Because it's here, my friend. What we're gonna do this. So that's interesting because here what we're gonna do is after we open up this, for some reason, mm, you got it. Okay. Now it is time to install the necessary library for this. We need to indicate which version do we have. Okay, this can become quite annoying. Okay, and then install this. All right, and now you can say npm run def as a way to execute this node mon. And if we now go and navigate to the local host 3000, we should be able to look at this. So right now we're going to practice, we're going to do is the ingredients. Okay. And this is how it should look like with all of this. As you can see, we have even icons like this. Was a cherry, but because this course is more relevant for the backend, and database, you got this. You also using is this slider here, similar to this. You have all of this eggplant, which is interesting, as well as recipe beautiful fruits, avocado, banana, orange, strawberry, watermelon. What the hell? Oh, because we changed that in the background. Yeah. But as you can see here, we are connecting successfully to that. Our Postgres instance is up and running because otherwise it won't be able to do this. because otherwise it won't be able to do this. Yeah, because we changed the watermelon here. It's like, yeah. So in our container here, hmm okay, because this container is now running inside of our, yeah, but you should detect that. You should be able to detect that. You should be definitely able to detect that we are running that in use. Confident Ruby. Hmm This is in use, in use. So the question here is by looking at this Docker Scout. Yeah, the question of this is that they are not running, okay? No containers are running, at least those that you can detect that, you know? But in fact, behind the scenes, they are already. Because if you can run this command here of the Docker as a way to get in, it's a node daemon from that. And if I say, hey Docker, uh, Docker PS, it say there is no, okay, oh my god. And where are you pulling the data? That's interesting. Where are you pulling all of the data? Where in the F are you pulling all of the data, man? Yeah, but I mean, I get it, but it's like, where are you getting all of this data anyway? Anyway, man. Anyway. Anyway. Where are you getting all of this data, man? You know what I mean? You must be getting that for some place. The port default is 32.